Okay, you have your NFL top 10 NFL running backs. So I'm going to be ranking the top 10 NFL running backs instead of doing a tier list because there are so many above average NFL running backs that probably every list is going to be different. And I'm just going to be the top 10 NFL running backs right now. So it's going to be looking at the running back's career, but with heavy consideration for the 2023 season. So at number 10, I'm going to have Jonathan Taylor. He has not played a lot in the past 2 years. Last year, he only played in 10 games and 21 games in the past 2 years, whether that's been injury or holdout. But he has been very, very effective. You can see here in the stats, he would have had like well over 1,000 yards had he played all 17 games. And he can still be a number one. He had a lot of rushing attempts. He was effective, 4.4 yards per carry. He had 7 rushing touchdowns in 10 games. Um, so I still think Taylor is a very top 10 back. Even though he hasn't played a lot, he has been very, very effective in those games that he has played. And then at number 9, I'm going to have James Cook. He had a breakout 2023 season, and James Cook, I think he's got to be one of the more talented NFL running backs right now. He can like take over a game, like the game against Dallas or against Broncos. Um, he had over 1,000 rushing yards. He's both the rush dual threat running back with over 400 rushing, receiving yards. He does definitely have to polish some things up. He drops too many passes and then drops passes in big moments, and he's too inconsistent. But his upside alone, I think, makes him a top 10 NFL running back. And then number 8, I'm gonna have James Conner. I think he's had a very, very underrated career. Throughout his career, he's always had 700 to 1,000 rushing yards every season. This last season, he probably had the most underrated 2023 um, season. He played in 13 games, had over 1,000 rushing yards, and he has been a really good receiving back, and he graded out really well in PFF grade. He's just his consistency and then having a very, very good 2023 season, I think, boost him up to number 8. And number 7, you're going to have another very young running back, Brees Hall. I think another guy that probably had a very underrated 2023. In his rookie year, 2 years ago, he showed some flashes, and this year he played all 17 games. He had just under 1,000 yard rushing, and that's rushing against a very, very bad Jets offensive line. And he had 76 receptions. He's like Alvin Kamara, but better. Both very good dual threat. He had 1,500 scrimmage yards. Could do better in those touchdowns, but under that Jets offensive line, that was very, very impressive by Brees Hall. And number 6, I'm gonna have Raheem Mostert. Similar to Taylor, kind of. Mostert has always been effective when he plays. His injury history is very concerning, but the last 2 years he's played 30-ish games. And then last year he had 18 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns. I might be overrating him a little bit, but these past 2 years he has just under 2,000 rushing yards. Not the greatest receiving back, but just last year alone with all those touchdowns, his vision continues to get better. Not sure if I want to build around him, but as of right now, he's got to be one of the better running backs. Number 5, I'm gonna have Saquon Barkley. Barkley probably the most second or third most talented back on this list. It's just he has similar to Mostert and Jonathan Taylor. He hasn't played. He has been injured too much, but similar to them also, when he plays, he's pretty effective. And 2023 was his worst season um where he played the majority of the game, but he still had 962 rushing yards, and he's a good wide receiver, good well-rounded back. I still think he's top 5 because of all his talent he has, and yeah, I still think he's a top 5 back and should find some suitors in free agency. And number 4, I'm gonna have Nick Chubb. I know he got injured last year, but previous year he was Mr. Consistent, getting over 1,000 yards, averaging over 5 yards per carry. Obviously, 2023 he got injured. I think he'll bounce back stronger. Just previous years, I think he'll go back to the good old Nick Chubb next year. And then number 3, I'm gonna have Kareem Williams. Similarly, I'm just using the 2023 only standard, but in 2023 he was insane. He had 12 games that had almost 100 rushing yards a game. He was also very, very good in the rush touchdowns. okay wide receiver, and his average like yardage per game, he had probably the biggest impact on his team. Number 2, I'm going to have Derrick Henry, Mr. Good Old Reliable. Again, had over 1,000 yards. So that yard per carry isn't looking that good, but his consistency keeps him at number 2. He can still be a number 1 back. He can still handle like almost up to 300 carries, and I think his receiving game is underrated. Even though he didn't have any reception touchdown, but I still think he's a okay receiving back, and he's up here because of consistency. Every year, it's not easy every year to get like 1,100 yards and that many attempts, so I still have him at number 2. And number 1, you're obviously gonna have Christian McCaffrey. Um, Always probably the most talented back outside of a few injuries a couple of years ago, but these last 2 years, he hasn't really missed many games because of injuries. And last year, he had what, similar 21 total touchdowns. Definition of a dual threat back, over 500 receiving yards, almost 1,500 rushing yards. He's like the ultimate back pretty much. Can catch, he can run, he can get touchdowns, he can handle the workload, as long as he does not get injured. And for everybody that skips to the end of the video, here's your top 10 list, including a couple of honorable mentions in Travis Etienne and Joe Mixon. So there you have it. That's my NFL top 10 running backs.